Okay, so this one is, I guess it's another homebrew monster-ish topic, but I wanted to talk about giving monsters various class features, usually reserved for players, and more specifically, things like Rage from the Barbarian. Now, the thing about Rage is it's basically just complete blanket resistance to the 3 physical damage types. And that's strong. That's pretty strong. It makes a lot of sense for a player character to have that specific kind of resistance to let them achieve a certain type of goal and a certain type of playstyle. But if you just add that carte blanche, is that the right word? If you just add that wholesale to a monster, it's kind of a dick move, because you're basically just doubling its health. And like the things that players normally have to worry about as far as rage, monsters kind of don't. So it's goofy. But one thing I really like about it as a concept is, especially if you have a monster that goes into a rage halfway through a fight, it's really similar to, dozens of video game bosses that enter a rage state after a certain amount of time has passed or a certain amount of damage is done. And in most video games, say the monster enters a rage state, maybe their openings close up, like they don't have as many openings as easy opportunities for damage for the player. Maybe they get more aggressive, more continuous attacks. There's lots of things. But a lot of the time, these are temporary. It's a temporary state. And maybe it only lasts a minute or whatever, depending on the type of boss, the type of game. Maybe the player is meant to this is like a desperate struggle, and you're just supposed to survive the boss's rage state until they fall out of it, and then you can just kill them afterwards. Maybe you have to, now everything ramps up to 11, and you have to take every little scrap of an opening you get in order to continue to do damage to this boss. Otherwise, it's going to kill you. There's a lot of factors there. But in a TTRPG that's turn-based, that's not as interesting. You're like, we just have to survive. It's just going to do more damage now. Because, you can't really use the idea of openings and stuff in the same way in a TTRPG. So, maybe in a TTRPG, it becomes, maybe it's a trade-off effect. The monster gains more offensive ability for losing reactions and bonus actions or something like that. Or maybe you come up with a specific mechanic or a specific way that the player characters can knock the boss out of their rage. Like if they do a certain amount of lightning damage, or all they have to do is knock it prone, which good luck, because it's got a athletics modifier of 15. Whatever mechanic makes sense for that monster. I don't know. Maybe you just have to hit it with a high enough attack roll. Whatever it is. You just got to get a crit that knocks it out. Could be anything. But that's an opportunity to play into your party's strengths as well. Like, if you come up with a monster in a vacuum that you need to knock prone, and all your players are, like, you've got a Dex longbow samurai fighter that doesn't have the trip maneuver from Battlemaster. Well, he can't really knock people prone from range. And you've got a wizard that doesn't know grease. And you've got, whatever it is you got. Like, you don't have players that can actually take advantage of that weakness. Well, that's kind of a waste of design, and now your monster is effectively stronger than it should be because they can't take advantage of that weakness. So maybe, after a certain amount of ranged attacks, it just falls out of range. Yeah, it could just be a certain number of attacks, but just that kind of idea. The monster enters a dangerous state, and the players have to figure out how to knock it out of that powered-up state. That's always fun, because that's a bit more interactive, it's more narrative focused than just pure numbers. But then there's a lot of other class features to give monsters too, and class features are really powerful. If you give a monster the wrong class feature, they're going to wreck house with your players. And then also, monsters don't really have the same restrictions that players do either. Like, a monster being able to make an attack as a bonus action is kind of weird, because they could just make it as part of the same action. They don't have other things that are competing with their bonus action. Like, for player characters, you can possibly have a lot of different features competing for the use of that bonus action. Like, if you're an ASMR barbarian, you already right there have two things you can do with your bonus action, and ideally you want them both up immediately. Or let's say you're a ASMR berserker barbarian. Well, and I'm using the new version of the ASMR also for Monsters of the Multiverse, where their transformation is a bonus action. So, if you're a berserker barbarian, you rage the first turn. Alright, you can't make your bonus action strike. Alright, second turn, you're going to Celestial Revelation to get your flying speed. Okay, you can't bonus action attack there. You're in the third round of combat before you can make your special, big class feature bonus action attack. It takes that long to get to it. So, there's a lot of choices to be made there for a player character. But for monsters, if it doesn't make sense, if it being a bonus action doesn't make a whole lot of explicit sense, just make it part of an action. Or, the only reason you might make it a bonus action is if it's completely different than their action. So, you give them cunning action. They can dash as a bonus action. That makes sense, because it's completely different and it helps you compartmentalize. But bandit captains, if they hit with one or two of their attacks, I forget exactly how it works, but if they meet a certain criteria taking the attack action, they can make a dagger attack as a bonus action. It's I would just word that that doesn't have to be a bonus action. Well, it does, maybe if you also give them aggressive, letting them move as a bonus action, it curtails that a little bit, so they can't do all of that in one turn. But it's not really doing a whole lot. I feel bonus actions on monsters they either have to be really contextual, or they have to compete with something. Ideally, so that the player characters can force monsters to make choices about their bonus actions. Gnolls, for example. Let's say let's not use those. Yeah, let's use that bandit captain. So that that first turn, they're approaching the party. They can't quite get there, so let's say they can dash as a bonus action. They run up, they get to land their two attacks, but now their bonus action is used up, so they can't make their special third attack. That can make sense. That way, it portrays the bandits really rushing up. They still have enough time to get their attacks because of how fast they are and how much they know how to attack and be offensive on the run, but they don't have enough time to really leverage their full offensive capability. But now that they're up in your face, the next turn they can. So it's stuff like that. It's kind of what you want to do, I feel. Also, why I feel Action Surge could use a bit of a redesign, and I'm sure it will in the 5.5 books coming in 2024. Yeah, in those books. Like, I feel about Action Surge, most likely what they'll do, if they don't, if they do change it so that it's like, everything is, you get whatever, you get the feature proficiency bonus times per day. What they'll probably do is, when you use Action Surge, like, you can do an extra action, and it'll mostly feel the same in Tier 1. But the way I see them doing it is, it'll be closer to a hasted action. Like, you can only get one extra attack out of it. You can dash, you can use an item, you can bonus, you can disengage, you can do all those things. But it's just, you can't get your full suite of attacks a second time. But you can do it more times. That way, it's more attractive to use for, like, dashes and disengages and stuff like that, which I think is much more interesting and more flavorful. But using Action Surge for a whole another set of attacks is just so strong. It's hard, like, and you only have one Action Surge per combat, so it's like, I could use it to dash up and attack this turn, or I could do it next turn and do 4 attacks. Yeah, like, even if it's mathematically the same, it feels better to do more attacks later. So it's a thing. That's a little blurb about that, but yeah, giving monsters class features, thinking about, like, their bonus actions and shit. Like, in the recent Site 27 mission, I gave these raccoon monsters, if they got hit by poison damage, they would enter this Sarkic Frenzy state, which all Sarkic enemies are going to have from now on. They're not going to fight Sarkic enemies right away, but they'll know that. And when they're in that state, they get higher AC, they get extra damage, and they get Reckless Attack. They don't get Rage, but they get Reckless Attack. So, that I think is a really targeted use. It's like showing what these monsters like. It's in a frenzy. It's just attacking recklessly. Like, come on. Yeah, I guess that's it. I don't have anything else really to say. This was a really wide-reaching, or really meandering video.